All right. We got a lot of Bible to get through tonight. So if you have your Bibles, we are in the book of John, chapter 7. John chapter 7. We pick up in the middle, as John always wants you to remember where you are in the story. And they really are these big themes. This presentation of who Jesus is at the beginning in the prologue, moving into the beginning of his ministry. Then Jesus is going to start to tackle these very serious Jewish institutions. That's where we're going to find ourselves today at something called the Festival of Tabernacles. Okay? The Festival of Tabernacles. Anyone know what the word tabernacle means? Huh? The temple tent. That's a great way of putting it. It's a very unorthodox way of putting it, but it's very correct. It's like the temple tent. Okay, so in the Old Testament, as the Israelites were wandering in the desert, they always would put the Ark of the Covenant, which was symbolic of God's presence, in the middle of their camp. God insisted on being amidst his people, and they would build this tent called the tabernacle, and God would, it's actually also used as a verb, God would tabernacle with his people there. So he would come and he would be amongst his people. So the Feast of Tabernacles was symbolic of a few things. The really big motifs of the Festival of Tabernacles were essentially twofold, maybe threefold. One was the idea of tabernacling. At this point in the year, this was when the fruit of the vines or the vine crops were all brought in. So you have like root crops, and you've got like tree crops, and you've got like vine crops. Vine crops were like the premier crops, okay? Literally, you would go in the middle of your field and you would tabernacle there so that no one would steal your crops at this point of the year. You guarded your crops. You would literally create structures and tabernacle amongst your own field so no one else would come and steal your food. The second motif, so outside of the tabernacle itself or the building or the dwelling itself, we have this motif of it's kind of the Octoberish part of the year, okay? So think about, none of y'all lived in Bakersfield, but Bakersfield and Israel are almost on the exact same line of latitude, okay? So Bakersfield is I'm not going to set you up for that kind of a joke. It's a desert, okay? So it's got like a desert climate. Crap hole. That's inappropriate. Yeah, it's dry, it's arid, okay? When in the winter it gets really, really, really cold, and then there's about this month and a half of what we call the rainy season, which literally means it rains once or twice, but when it rains, it pours, and you can't really stop it, and then we get flash flooding and all that other jazz. Same thing in Israel. So during the Festival of Tabernacles, which is about October, what's happening outside? It's what? It's not raining. That happens in like March. In that kind of a climate, it actually probably happened more towards like January, February. And then the reason that we call the third month of the year by its name is because that's when kings would go off to war again, because the ground was beginning to get hard again and the rains were stopping, which is why we call the third month of the year March. March. Because that's when the people would march. So it would rain really hard December, January, February, and then March it started to dry up, which means from essentially the beginning of March until October we've experienced what? A butt ton of what? No, not rain. The opposite. Is anyone listening to me? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Drought. No water. No rain. Okay? So here, when we go, we're like, bummer, the lake level is low, right? Bummer. Something about the ocean. I don't know what happens to the ocean during not a lot of rain. I guess there's not really a big season of that. It's the ocean, so it's not, whatever. But you got to think ancient Near Eastern. What is water to them? It's life, okay? People on your property, you would bury these massive kind of clay holes. And you would pitch the side of them, and they were called cisterns. They were essentially these massive pots. And you would funnel water into them in these 1 or 2 months, and you would try to bring as much water into the cisterns as you could, and that needed to last you from March until basically October, November, December-ish. So when October came around, you were really hopeful that God was going to bring rain. So if water is this idea of the lifeblood of an agrarian culture, what else is happening in October when it comes to something unique about the end of summer moving into wintertime? What happens to days? They get shorter, right? For us, not a big deal. You just flip on the light switch a little bit earlier. But for them in particular, this meant that your whole world got a little bit shorter, right? You went inside earlier, you went to bed earlier, you probably woke up earlier. And as that was happening, there was kind of this yearning for light. If we want our crops to grow, we need light. And so we have very few hours during the day where we can actually have light now. And we need light. And light then and sunlight was their what? Good. Life. Water is life. Light is life, right? If we're an agrarian culture, if you've got a butt ton of water underground, what can you grow? Nothing. If you've got a butt ton of sunshine like the Sahara Desert, what can you grow? Nothing. You need both. You need light. You need water. You can't have one without the other. I just made that up. But it kind of rhymes if you say it funny. Okay? You need them both. So the Festival of Tabernacle, the way that people did it back then, which is really weird, is, I think that was actually stolen from paganism. When you wanted something from the gods, you would remind them how it worked, which is so dumb, right? You would like go to the altar, and if you wanted water from them, what do you think you poured all over the altar? Water. You like demonstrated for the gods what you wanted. And for whatever reason, the Israelites picked up on the tradition. And so during the Festival of Tabernacles, which was 8 days long, for the first 7 days, the priest would go down to the pool of Siloam, and he would scoop up water from a golden pitcher. He would take it to the temple, and people would like blow horns and trumpets. Then once he entered the temple, they would give 2 large blasts of the trumpets, and then he would pour water into this big bowl. And then at the bottom of the bowl, the water would fall out, and it would look like it was raining. And it was basically like, hey, here's day 1 of us doing our little rain dance. Day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. And on day 8, this happened 7 different times. So they would pour over and over again. And it was essentially calling for God to send life. We need you to send life. At the same time, a big part of the Festival of Tabernacles is on the most important day where all the water is being poured on, they would also light these massive lamps. Okay, these lamps were these massive bowls, and this is weird, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Inside the lamp was oil, like oil you would burn, and then there was this argument amongst, in Jewish thought, which is that a priest's garments were holy, that they were unique, that they weren't supposed to be disposed of. A little bit like the Eucharist in Catholic churches, if you guys grew up Catholic, the Eucharist being like the Lord's Supper or communion. When wine has been blessed, you can't just pour it out. You can't pour it down the sink. The priest has to drink it, okay? So if you took communion and there's a bottle of wine left over, the priest has to drink that wine, okay? Which, yeah, whatever. Or you have like a well. Some Catholic churches actually have a sink where the water goes directly into the earth. So that doesn't go through a system of drainage. It returns back to the soil from whence the grapes came. And that's also considered appropriate. So priests, back in this day and age, the Pharisees, their cloaks were considered important. So when a Pharisee would die or a priest would die, what they would do is they would take their underwear, because you couldn't just throw it away because it was holy, and they would basically ball it up, set it on fire, and that would be the wicks of the candles. So the wicks of the candles of the Festival of Tabernacles was the underwear of the priests soaked in oil. This is a weird friggin' festival, but don't shoot the messenger. This is what happened year after year. It was a very holy time for them. And so everyone, if you were a good Jewish guy, you would go up and you would do this. If you lived within 15 miles of Jerusalem, you had to go do this, or else you were under penalty of the law. You had to do this. And then if you were a good Jew outside of 15 miles, you did it just to show your piety for the law, right? Just to show how zealous and how important the law was to you. You would still go and you would do this. So, big motifs. Water is life. Light is life. God needs to send these to us or we're going to die. We open up now to the text. After this, after many disciples deserted him, that's what chapter 6 was all about. Jesus went around in Galilee. He did not want to go into Judea because the Jewish leaders there were looking for a way to kill him. See John 5 verse 16. Remember, they tried to kill him earlier in the chapters? But when the Jewish festival of tabernacles was near, Jesus' brothers said to him, "You should leave Galilee and go to Judea, so that your disciples there may see the works you do. No one who wants to become a public figure like you acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, you should go show yourself to the world." For even his own brothers did not believe him. So we see in this ongoing court case, this is essentially the thick of the plot. This is the thick of the court case. We're going to see people throwing out accusations, and we're going to see their response to him. We're going to see a number of verdicts, possible verdicts. And the whole chapter ends with, "Who is he to you?" And we see the very first witness. We see the very first response to Jesus, and it's his own flesh and blood. It's his brothers, and they think it's a joke. It's a joke to them. Well, if you're so intent on becoming this big public figure, then what better place to go than Jerusalem? It's going to be jam-packed. Go show yourself to them. Do all your miracles so your disciples will believe you. Therefore, Jesus told them, "My time is not yet here." So typically in John's gospel, the theme of time, translated in the Greek to ora, or hour of my time. What does my time mean in John's gospel? Remember? Yeah, his death. This isn't going to use that word ora. It's going to use the word kairos, which is a different way of understanding it. So John's taking a break from talking about right here. He's not saying, don't think crucifixion, think Jesus' favorite time. Jesus said, "I don't feel like going yet." So some people will go, "Oh, well, Jesus said his time hadn't come, and yet in a second we're going to see he goes to Jerusalem anyway. Jesus lied." No, read the Greek. He says, "The time that I've appointed for myself to go has not yet arrived." So Jesus tells them, "No, I'm not going to listen to you. For you, any time will do. The world cannot hate you." So he's going, you can go whenever you want. But see, when I go, these people tried to kill me last time. Let me center myself, and then I'll go when I'm good and ready. "You go up to the festival. I am not going up to the festival because my time has not yet fully come." After he said this, he stayed in Galilee. However, after his brothers had left for the festival, he also went, not publicly, but in secret. Now at the festival, the Jewish leaders were watching for Jesus and asking, "Where is he?" Among the crowds, there was widespread whispering about him. Some said, "He is a good man." Others said, "No, he deceives the people." But no one would say anything publicly about him for fear of his leaders. What's the most prolific court case in y'all's life, right? What's one that you guys remember the most? Has there been a court case in your growing up that you remember the headlines, you remember the trial, you remember the daily response of what's going on in the courtroom? Do you guys have any of those for your generation? Anyone? Yeah, okay, so in the officers in the George Floyd case, good. What else? Epstein, good. I'm going to leave that one alone. What else? Okay, good. What was Casey Anthony? Gotcha. Yep, good. Okay. Yeah, when I was growing up, O.J. Simpson, every day we tuned in. I remember where I was. I was on the bottom step at Tulsa Lutheran School in about 3rd grade in Oklahoma when my friend Eric came down the stairs and went, "He's innocent. They found him innocent." And there was just this outrage from some people, and other people were excited. It was a weird mixed bag of like, yay, what? What? Excuse me? And every day we watched it. I also grew up in Oklahoma, so there was a really big thing that happened at the Federal Building, the Mira Federal Building in Oklahoma. You remember what happened there? The Oklahoma City bombing, right? Almost 200 people died, most of them kids, because this bomb went off right near the nursery. And every day we watched the trial of Timothy McVeigh. What's going to happen to him today? What sentence is he going to get? We were watching the whole thing play itself out. And in it, you have all these different stages of it. You've got your opening statements. It might sound like this. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Then that Word became flesh and dwelt among us. But darkness covered everything. And the darkness hated the light so much that instead of being drawn to it like a moth to flame, it was quenched. The darkness took the light. They didn't recognize the light as the creator, so they murdered it. But you missed it. If you wanted his murder, you missed it too, because this was God. I'd like to present evidence A. There was a wedding that took place in Cana, where there were 6 huge 180 gallons worth of water. This man, on trial before you, turned it into wine. I have witnesses. I've got servants. They've got no reason to lie. I've got a mother. She might be a biased witness. But let me tell you, she didn't think her son was Messiah either. And they're witnesses. I've got the master of ceremonies from there who drank the wine and said it was the best wine ever. Sir, where else would you get wine like this? I've never had any wine like this before. Could a poor family like this have brought wine from any special locations? Absolutely not. It's beyond the realm of what is intellectually responsible or coherent to see that anything could have happened other than supernatural. Thank you. Your Honor, I'd like to bring Nicodemus to the stand. Nicodemus, don't be afraid, Nicodemus. Come on in. Hi. Nicodemus, you're a teacher of Israel. What did he tell you? He told me I didn't know anything. Then he told me to follow him, and I was too afraid. I was afraid of the attitudes of man, but I wish I had. I think he was God. I should have done it. Thank you, Nicodemus. Stop crying. Next witness. Hi, my name is Jess, and I live in Samaria. And everyone in the court goes, oh, Samaria. Yeah. And I've been really embarrassed about that, and I have this long list of things I've done in my life, but that doesn't matter anymore. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Put her on trial. No, you don't understand. The one who came back from the dead said that I was absolved of my sin. He called me his own. He told me that he was the Messiah. He replaced my shame with honor. And now I walk boldly before you as someone who would boldly proclaim that this man was in fact the Messiah. He told me things that no one else could have possibly known. Even after I lied to him, he called me out on it. And what do you think? He was talking to the other Samaritans before and got my backstory? Jews do not associate with Samaritans. He's the Messiah. Thank you. And what about you? Yeah, I was one of the 25,000 people who was there that got fed out of this kid's lunchbox. It's pretty phenomenal for me. What about you? My name is Peter. I watched the guy walk on water, then he claimed to be the divine name Yahweh, ego eimi in the emphatic. He called himself Yahweh God. I'm pretty sure it was him. I watched the guy get transfigured on a mountain, for God's sake. I don't know what else you want me to do about that. This guy was God. I'm going to go to my death proclaiming this was... They're going to crucify me upside down because I want to be crucified like Jesus was crucified. In the middle of the court case, then here comes the prosecution. Thank you, defense. Do you rest your case? For now, I do. Prosecution. Yeah, we'd like to go ahead and make it abundantly clear that not everyone is into this whole Jesus thing. For instance, there seems to be this natural dichotomy set up between, do you crown him king or do you crucify him as a heretic? Look, this is a false dichotomy. There's a lot of ways to understand him. In fact, I'd like to give you some examples. Verse 25. At that point, some of the people of Jerusalem began to ask, this guy teaches really well. Isn't this the one they're trying to kill? But here he is speaking publicly. Verse 28. Then Jesus, still teaching in the temple courts, cried out, yes, you know me, and you know where I am from. I am not here in my own authority, but the one who sent me is true. You do not know him, but I know him because I am from him, and he sent me. Then they tried to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him, because his aura had not yet come, his crucifixion. Still, many in the crowd believed in him. They said, when Messiah comes, will he perform more signs than this man? The Pharisees heard the crowds whispering such things about him. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple guards to arrest him. Jesus said, I am with you for only a short time, and then I'm going to the one who sent me. You will look for me, but you will not find me. And where I am, you cannot come. Verse 35. The Jews said to one another, where does this man intend to go that we cannot find him? Will he go where our people live scattered amongst the Greeks? That's called the diaspora, right? After the Rome came in, all the Jews kind of spread out. That's called a dispersion. In the Greek, the diaspora. Is he going to live amongst the people who were dispersed? What did he mean when he said that? Is he going to kill himself? 37. On the last and greatest day of the festival, what happens on the last and greatest day of the festival? Two things. Number one, what happens? 7 times water is poured over the altar until it literally begins flowing out of the temple. Secondly, what happens on the greatest day? You light the undies on fire. Okay? On the last and greatest day of the festival, Jesus stood and said in a loud voice. Can you imagine this? This most pivotal moment of the festival. This is kind of like the lighting of the New York City Times Square Christmas tree or Rockefeller Center Christmas tree. And everyone's standing around the tree like, Fahu Doris, Fahu Doris, welcome Christmas, Christmas Day. And then someone gets up in the middle of it and goes, turn off the music. I am Santa Claus. He takes the very central point and he goes, no, I'm not the big red jolly fat guy. That's not what I mean. I mean, you've been looking for gifts. You've been wondering if you're a good person or a bad person, for a present or for lumps of coal, but you've missed it. That's not the point. I am Santa in this respect. I sacrificially give of myself. But I declare, because of my righteousness, that all of my children, all who follow me, are good. But here's the thing. You all deserve coal. That's the irony of Christmas. You're all screwed up. And it all depends on how weird your parents are. Some kids are the worst kids ever and they get lumps of coal, so there's different standards of measurement. Some people have great kids, but they got a B on their report card and they get lumps of coal. You see how the system doesn't work out? I am the good father. I am the good judge. I am the good Saint Nick. He gives good gifts. I give everlasting gifts. He gives based on merit. I give based on grace. I am not just Santa Claus. I'm infinitely better than him. Messianic recognition, replacement, and abundance. Now, I just made that up, so I have no clue if that really stands the test of time. All analogies break down at some point, so don't take it too far. I don't think that Jesus is Santa Claus. Please don't write about this, okay? But this is what Jesus is doing. In the middle of the lighting of the Times Square Christmas tree, in the middle of these priests walking up, chanting the Psalms, the Hallels. That's what they're doing, chanting the Hallel Psalms, however they talk. And then they're like chanting Psalm 94, Psalm 120. They're chanting all these, pouring it on. And Jesus just stands up and he says, if anyone is thirsty, come to me, and I will give you living water. Could you imagine that moment? Could you imagine the disciples? Can you feel the dumb chills that you probably would have felt? Like, sit down, sit down, sit down. This is just, it's beautiful. It's this beautiful literature, people. Here's what it says. Let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as Scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow out from within them. By this, he meant the Spirit. So we just got an answer to the Sudoku puzzle from chapter 4 and the Sudoku puzzle from chapter 2. Chapter 2, we said, well, if you replaced all the ceremonial living water washing jars with wine, then how are we supposed to be cleansed? Where are we supposed to go to get cleansing? Jesus says, not where. Whom? To whom will we go? Or more appropriately, who will come to you to cleanse you? The answer is what? It says right there. Living water is the Spirit. Chapter 4, the woman says, Sir, give me this living water that I might drink and never get thirsty again. Jesus says, truly I tell you, anyone who believes in me will receive what? The living water. What is the living water? The Spirit. Believe in Christ, get the living water. Believe in Christ, receive the Spirit. Believe into him, receive the gift of the Spirit. Jesus chooses the middle of his festival ceremony to declare this truth. If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. On hearing these words, some of the people said, surely this man is the prophet. Others said, he is the Messiah. Still others said, how can the Messiah come from Galilee? Does not Scripture say the Messiah will come from David's descendants? So what do we get here? This guy just stands up in the middle and makes the most provocative claim after dodging guards that for some reason they reach out to grab him and then they can't. They go to arrest him and then they're paralyzed with something. They go, why can't we arrest you? He makes a fascinating claim saying, you think water gives you life, but I am here to tell you that I am life. You are here to see the great light, but I tell you that I am the great light. And what are they hung up on? But did anyone see his birth certificate? I thought he said he was from Nazareth, but I thought Messiah is supposed to be from Bethlehem. What do we call that? Ironic misunderstanding. They just don't get it. It's in the middle of this festival, and they just don't get it. Darkness is there again. Finally, the temple guards went back to the chief priests and the Pharisees, who asked him, why didn't you bring him in? Well, no one ever spoke the way this man did, he said. You mean he has deceived you also, the Pharisees retorted. Have any of the rulers of the Pharisees believed in him? No, but this mob that knows nothing of the law, there was a curse on them. Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus earlier and who was one of their own number, asked, does our law condemn a man without first hearing him in to find out what he has been doing? They replied, are you from Galilee too? Look into it, and you will find that a prophet does not come from Galilee. So Nicodemus shows up to assert what? This man deserves a fair trial. You see, it end caps a whole section on trial language by saying, let's put him on trial. Let's put him under the microscope up against the law and see how he does. Do you guys see all the accusations in there? I'll just walk through some of these that I'd written down earlier today. Here's what's happening. Brothers, right? First witnesses. What do they say? What do the brothers think about him? What do his very own brothers think about him? Huh? What do they think? They don't believe him. In fact, they think it's a joke. They find it comical. You should go up. To which Jesus consistently retorts, this is a matter of life and death. Then we got the Pharisees. They treat him with contempt. Why? Because he threatens their system. They all have a bias. They walk in with prejudice towards Jesus. Why don't the brothers want to do it? Well, the brothers don't want to worship their brother. So they walk in with a prejudice and a bias. You will not receive a fair trial from me because you're my brother. Did the Pharisees take into consideration all the things that Jesus had done and said? No. They approached with prejudice and bias because they want, what would it have meant for them if he was Messiah? He was breaking through all of their laws and all their barriers. He was calling himself Lord of the Sabbath. He was undermining their authority. So if they gave him a fair trial and found him to be God, their whole system is done. He doesn't get a fair trial from them. He gets contempt instead. Then you get the Sadducees. The Sadducees are a group that they were religious, but the Romans protected them. So you got the Sadducees who are saying, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to start anything. We're going to send in a absentee ballot. Okay? We weren't there for the vote. Y'all can try him over there. Y'all can try him over there. Do whatever you want. We don't want any part of it. You see, Rome is making us rich and powerful, and we've got money and possessions. And so Rome's taking care of us. We're not here to start anything. We don't want to cause a stir. The Sadducees will not give him a fair trial either. They're not there to start anything. The elitists, the arrogant, they exclude him. They go, wait, this is what they ask him in the section we didn't read. So where did you get your learning from? Where did you learn? Who taught you? Where are you from? Where are you going? They want his credentials. They hear him teaching in the courts, and they believe him. They go, oh, this guy's powerful. And then they go, nah, blah, 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 blah. But you don't get a pass with me. Where are you from? They were so intent on their old religious systems, and there was such an intellectual hang-up for them that they went, no, you don't pass my set of credentials. As if this guy was the creator of the universe but didn't go to the right school, you would write him off? Well, yeah, it makes sense to me. They were obsessed with their way of viewing everything. If it didn't make sense to them, it just didn't make sense. They basically said, we just don't need him. You've got the crowd. Some are interested, right? Some debated. But they all stopped at knowing about God and never sought to know Christ. Now we've got some verdicts. Here's some verdicts in the trial. See if you can find one in there. What do people say about him? Give me a couple. What do some people say about Jesus in this section? Some of the verdicts of the people. After considering all of the signs and of all of the things people are saying, what are the verdicts they arrive at? He's a prophet. Okay? Is Jesus a prophet? Chapter 4, the Samaritan woman says, Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Does Jesus say, no, I'm not? No. But he says, I am a prophet, but I am the prophet. So is he a prophet? Yes. Is that the whole truth? No, we're going to find a lot of this. What else do people accuse him of being? Loud, I can't hear you. Messiah. So we get the proper identification of him. What do other people say? What? He's a liar. He's deceiving people. Good. What else? Good man. Who said that? He's a good man. Is he a good man? Yeah. Is that the whole truth? No. If we worship Jesus as a good man, will we be saved? If we worship him as a prophet, will we be saved? No. Verse 20. What does verse 20 paint him as? Huh? He's a psycho. He's a madman. This guy doesn't know which way is up. This guy's talking all kind of nonsense. And think about Jesus' life. He looks kind of insane, right? He could have been king. He chose a crown of thorns. He could have been served. He chose to serve. He could have had people bowing at his feet. He chose to wash his disciples' feet. He could have had a kingdom of gold and chose a kingdom of dust. He looks crazy. And then some people appropriately approach him and say, you're a psycho. The religious leaders thought that they were he was drawing people away from the law, like a siren in the Odyssey. He was a seducer. He was a Sabbath breaker, a glutton. He had despicable friends. He for sure was a man of courage. Some people said he's a man of courage. He's going up against these people. In the middle of the festival, he stood up and said something ridiculous. He's a dynamic personality. He's got some crazy personality, great charisma. He does some incredible things. And some people say he is the Christ. But all their verdicts are motivated by one of three things. They're either motivated by fear, which is the vast majority, and they're motivated by fear. If I surrender fully to what you actually are, this has negative implications on my vested interests. Think about it. Is this still not the number one reason people reject Jesus? If I fully surrender to who this Jesus is, it will have a negative impact on my self-interests. What are some self-interests of the people? What's the self-interest of the Pharisees? Status, religiosity, power. What's a vested interest of Rome? Good. What's vested interest of his brothers? I don't want to be humiliated. I'm not going to worship my brother. So no, you don't get a fair trial with me. Some people are motivated by fear. Why does Nicodemus, instead of going, I'm the teacher of Israel, It's him, the Messiah. He's motivated by fear too. What's his vested interest? His job, his position. The circles you'll run in, the number one reason people will reject Jesus is when you really get to the core of it. When you get to the deepest core of it, people will reject God because they're terrified of him. Because surrendering to him means something that will cost them everything. Now, when you surrender everything to Jesus, as we see again and again, messianic, he does what? Recognizes, replaces, and gives abundance. Those of us who have already surrendered to him go, I get how fun it would be to hold on to that power, but the power that you find in Christ is much better. It's more better. I get the prestige of being popular, but being known by the King of the universe is much better. Messianic recognition, replacement, abundance. We're going to end the beginning of chapter 8. As we watch Jesus announce a verdict in a different case with great power. Then they all went home, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach. So he sits in a position of teaching, and it's called the Bema seat, or the Moses seat. He's ready to teach. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. Before we conclude the story, the background of it is that in order to be, if you were caught in the act of adultery, it was a capital offense. You were murdered. The way that you were murdered is they would bury you in soft dirt up to your waist so you couldn't move, and they would put rocks in around that would kind of crush your legs so you couldn't run away. And then when you were incapable of getting out, they would just throw rocks at you until one knocked you unconscious, and they would just beat your head in with rocks. That was the punishment for adultery. The crime is so severe, the punishment is so severe, that it almost never happened that someone was caught in the act of adultery. When they say you're caught in the act of adultery, you had to be sure of it, because remember, reverse prosecution, and B, you had to tell, if you first you needed the witness of two males, had to have seen them in the act. And this is kind of a weird way of saying it. Not the act before the act, not in any kind of foreplay. That wasn't the act. In the act of intercourse itself, that was the capital offense. In fact, if you caught someone or you saw someone beginning to engage in foreplay, you had a Jewish obligation to stop them. If you knew someone was about to commit adultery and you were aware of it, you had to stop them. And then when you finally said, "These people, I watched them committing adultery. I didn't see any foreplay. I just saw it happening. It was broad as daylight." It would have to be bright enough. You have to be able to give an accusation enough that you were able to tell the details of the bed sheets, the color of the bed sheets, the things in the room, the color of the sandals. You had to be able to tell all these things. The law is set up so stringently that no one would have ever really got caught doing this. Could you imagine that? Like, where would you be walking where people, knowing this punishment of being stoned to death, would be in any kind of way in a window where you walked by, you're like, they are definitely engaged in the act of coitus itself. It's not foreplay, that's full-on intercourse. It's in the window, right? So what do you think happened? If they're setting up Jesus to trap him, then what can we almost assume is happening right here? It's a setup. Someone, perhaps knowing exactly what this man and this woman were doing, or a lot of times what would happen is the man, wanting to get rid of his wife, would have someone come and rape her outside of marriage. He would bring two of his friends as witnesses and say, I saw this man's wife sleeping with this guy. We both saw it. She should be executed. because you couldn't get a divorce without appropriate cause under Mosaic law. So it was a much more common practice to set up your wife and have her executed so that you could get out of a marriage. So this woman has already experienced what is most likely presumption on her innocence, that either she is caught in the most horrifying, embarrassing moment of her life, or she was literally abused. It was forced on her, and then people watched it and saw her in her nakedness, in her shame, and accused her. Could you imagine that moment where you felt the setup coming and your husband was complicit to the whole thing? But in his head, we can finally get rid of this religious guy. So as he stands in the corner and watches you get taken advantage of, and he then becomes a witness in your trial, and then he throws you in front of this Jesus character. And now Jesus sits in the seat of Moses, where this woman is thrown in front of him as an object to be disposed of. Now what do you say? If you say stone her, we don't have permission from Rome, which means you're going to be breaking Roman law. You'll be executed. If you say let her go, you're breaking Jewish law, which means you're not really a rabbi, and we'll have you executed. So really the question is, who do you want to kill you? And we know this Jesus character has an affinity and a broken heart for women in particular in this society. We watch it with the Samaritan woman. We watch it with his mother. We watch it all throughout the Gospels. We know he's got a soft spot for women who are in pain and who have been abused and used. It's Mark chapter 4 with the bleeding woman. It's Talitha Koume with the little girl being brought back to life. We know he's got a soft spot for what this culture doesn't care about. Let's use his weakness against him. Who do you want to kill you, Jesus? Rome or the Jews? Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let anyone who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Manny, can you look up Jeremiah 17, verse 13? And America, can you look up Exodus 23, verse 1? Anyone have a question when I just read that section? Anything come to mind? I'll read it one more time. There's this pinnacle, pivotal, emotional precipice of a moment. The woman's in front of her. She's just undergone something which we can only describe as absolute, broken, pain-filled, torturous, embarrassing shame. Jesus is in the middle of teaching, and this woman is thrown before him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. Any questions from that? What's the most natural response? Unless you have zero curiosity and your brain is likened to Play-Doh, what do you like Play-Doh, not Plato, Aristotle, Socrates? If it's made of mush, you might go, who cares? But if you have a curious cell in your body, what is your first question? What are you writing at a time like this? Manny, what is Jeremiah 7? Or actually, let's start with America. What does Exodus 23, verse 1 say? Do not plot to get someone executed. Do not act as a false witness when it incriminates somebody else. What's Jeremiah 17 verse, what did I say? 17 verse 13? Read it. Whatever I said. Did I say 17, 13? Go ahead. Keep going. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know. Good. Perfect. It says, Lord, those who turn away from you, their sins will be written in the dust of the earth. For you are the spring of living water, declares the Lord. So, does the Bible tell us exactly what he writes? No. This is one of those ask God when I get there questions. But I'm putting my money here. I'm putting my money that either Jesus is writing their sins, like Jeremiah 17 verse 13 says, he will write their sins in the dust of the earth because he himself will be the source of living water, or he's writing Exodus 23 verse 1, which they would have been well aware of, which says, if you give false testimony, you will go on trial. Whatever it is, I like this Jeremiah one better just because it seems to fit better with the spring of living water. It seems to kind of lay over it. So Jesus bends down, and I bet he looks up at these people who think he is a stranger to them. And the first guy's name is Gaius, and the second guy's name is Cornelius, whatever their names are. And he starts writing their name, and then he writes their most egregious sin. And then he goes to the next one, and he writes their name, and he writes their most egregious sin. And they know, they are identified with the sin. And they're not about to go, no, I've never done that before. Nuh-uh. Because they're already freaked out. Who is this guy? How does he know my name? And how does he know I did that? So what do? Oh, jeez. What the heck? I thought she was on trial. This guy wrote my name. And then he wrote pornography on last Tuesday at 11:33 p.m. That's exactly what I was doing. This guy wrote my name. And then next to it says I kicked my dog. I did kick my dog. How does this guy know this stuff? They got him in checkmate, and Jesus simply goes, you're right. Now, as the law would have it, the most righteous person gets to throw the first rock. That's the way it's written in Jewish law. So he starts by going, you're not throwing first. Gaius. Won't be you, will it? Epaphroditus. Not you either. You. And I think people start catching on, and they're like, Epaphroditus. And they start writing their name. They're like, no, scratch it. Just let me out, right? And then after he writes all their names, he looks up. And what happens? After he finishes, he looks up and he goes, all right, so let's just get in order. Whoever has never sinned can cast the first I lost my place. Here it is. Let anyone who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Then again he stooped down and continued to write in the ground. At what? Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. And they were like, he didn't write my name. He's like, oh yeah. When he stoops back down to write, it says everyone leaves. One at a time. The older ones first. Why? Because in Jewish custom, the older righteous were the first ones to throw. So he starts with their names and goes, you're not going to make it. They're like, okay. They all leave. Until Jesus was the only one left. Who deserves to throw the first stone? The most righteous. Or the oldest? Who's the most righteous of all of them? Who is the oldest of all of them? He's infinitely older than all of them. So I wonder if he has a rock. Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are your accusers? Where are the people who condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. I mean, do you just love Jesus deeper when you read his text? You just, without context, it's this neat story of Jesus like passively walking, going, oh yeah, whoever is without sin. But then you get into the thick of it and you realize this is a victim of assault, that Jesus comes in and stands between him and the accusers, and he brings up their past, and then he washes away hers. And this woman who's becoming objectified, he reaches out to her as his own daughter. He has this one-on-one moment, which is absolutely inappropriate for rabbis to do. Everyone leaves, and he looks her square in the eye as he's still sitting down. And he says, well, then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. If you don't love Jesus, what is wrong with you? He's so great. He's so deeply loving. He's such a beautiful man, such a powerful spirit, such a courageous being, such an advocate for you and me, that he would stand between me and the accusers of this world. And he would pick up the only one worthy to pick up a rock and throw it at me, sets it down and goes, where are your accusers? I don't mean who wants to say things or who's going to talk. I mean, who are your accusers? Who is worthy to bring accusation to you that sticks? There is only one, and I washed it away on the cross 2,000 years ago. So I ask you, if you're in the middle of shame or brokenness or hurt or pain, Jake and Grace and Sarah, they're going to come and lead us in a closing song. But I want you to bring the beauty of God's love for you to the surface. And I want you to bring forth, like a line of accusers, all of your sin in front of you and line them up. And then I want you to watch this nail-scarred carpenter from Galilee walk between you and your accusers and simply stoop down and write in the ground. And as they back off one at a time, as he turns back to you and he says, Sir, where are your accusers? Woman, where are your accusers? And in your heart, I want you to feel the forgiveness wash over you as the King of the universe says, neither do I condemn you. And he partners his grace with his truth, and he says, but now look, I love you just the way that you are, but now go live your life of sin. That's not the beautiful life I meant for you, was to be acting in sin. Now, you're not condemned from it. You're not less than because of it. You're still my son, you're still my daughter, but I've got a bigger, better will for your life, and it's not to keep participating in that old sin again. You see, sometimes it's loving kindness that leads us to repentance. And tonight I want that just to overwhelm you. The love of Christ poured out for you between you and your accusers, between you and your enemies, between you and the outside world, between you and this and the brokenness of maybe something a family member has said or something. And I want you to feel the warmth of the embrace of the God of the universe with his power and might and majesty and his nail-scarred hands and his calloused fingers. The carpenter comes and picks up your face and says, I'm not here to condemn you. I'm here to draw you to me with the deep, unending love of a father. To you, my son. To you, my daughter. And just to bask in it. Father, as we approach you tonight, we may have a lot of verdicts about who you are, but only one carries any weight. Sometimes in our fear, we want you to be less than you are because we know it's going to require a lot from us. Not a lot of work, a lot of action for you to love us or to save us, but just a lot of surrender when we want to be tyrannical. I want to be the God of my own life. I want to do things my way. I want to do justice my way. I want to do life my way. I want to do relationships my way. I want to lie my way. I want to cheat my way. I want to deceive my way. I want to steal my way. I want to disrespect my way. And I know that surrendering to you means the tyrant loses his throne so I can give it to you, the God of love and peace and joy and courage and grace and mercy, the advocate, the one who stands between me and a line of accusers. Would you take me deeper into your love tonight by the renewal of my heart and my mind through the power of your cross and your word of John chapter 7, calling me deeper still, and John chapter 8, calling me loved and forgiven when I don't deserve it. So let me pray. Amen.